All right, so I'm going to walk you through an example of working out a cladogram from a table of characteristics that you've already been given. So our example is going to be for insects, and we have 5 kinds of insects on this table, and we have traits or characteristics that we have evaluated those different kinds of insects on. And you will need to be given this table already. You aren't going to be having to go out and identify what characteristic states different organisms have. So we can see that we have this list of characteristics down the left-hand side. And then for each of the taxa, we have something in the box that tells us what it has for that characteristic. The first column on our table is always going to be the organism that we think is the most similar to the ancestor. Now that is going to have to be known ahead of time as well. So whatever taxa is in that far left-hand column is going to be our outgroup. And so this is the one that we're going to use to base the bottom of the tree against. We have a special name for that. So it's called the outgroup. On this table, the outgroup is a kind of very primitive insect called a silverfish. And you may have seen these. They like to hang out in boxes of books in your garage. You sometimes find them in the drawers in your kitchen or in the bathtub, and they never ever grow wings. They're such a primitive kind of insect. They're terrestrial, so they count as an insect, but they don't ever have wings. So we also have on here, we're going to look at butterfly, which is a usually bright, colorful, day-flying animal with 2 pairs of wings. Dragonfly is also a large, obvious insect. It has 2 pairs of wings that are going to stick out to the sides. And often you see those flying around ponds or where it's moist. Grasshopper is another fairly common insect you might have seen. Like Jiminy cricket. They are also sometimes called crickets, but that same kind of hopping kind of insect. And then moth is similar to butterfly. In our table here, the only thing we're going to be able to separate them by is that their antennae look different. So we'll quickly go through the characteristics so you understand what they are. First of all, pairs of legs. It is a characteristic of insects that they have 3 pairs of legs and that those are on the middle part of their body, the thorax. So we're doing insects, so they all have 3 pairs of legs. If we were doing all arthropods, then this would be a different number for the different groups, and that actually helps us tell them apart. Now the antennae, those are the little sensory organs that are going to stick out the head, and most of them have these plain antennae. That is, they just look like thin stalks, whereas our moth is going to have these large sort of extensions all along the length of the antennae that make them extra sensory perceptive, and we're going to call those feathery. The life cycle of insects, there's actually 3 different kinds, and I made it much simpler to fit onto this table. So if you know a lot about insects and you're looking at this and you're going, wait a sec, grasshoppers have partial metamorphosis, don't worry about it. I just tried to make this diagram work out pretty well, so I simplified a little bit. It turns out that when we think about a caterpillar as being the juvenile of a butterfly, that process of going from caterpillar to butterfly is called metamorphosis. So basically we're saying, you know, moths and butterflies, they do metamorphosis. That means they have a caterpillar. Grasshoppers, we're saying, yes, they go through some kind of metamorphosis. And then we're saying, no, dragonflies don't, and that no, silverfish don't. That when they're born, they look pretty much like the adult. They don't go through a complete body transformation. Now the mouth parts, that's actually their sort of their lips, their jaws, and that's how they're going to get food into their mouth. And the most primitive, basic kind of mouth parts are going to be these biting and chewing mandibles, and they come together from side to side like ants. So if you've seen a really close-up picture of the face of an ant, you've seen these chewing mouth parts, and these are what seems to be the original type of mouth that insects have. So we have silverfish has chewing. Proboscis we see here on butterflies and moths, and you may know that they drink nectar, and that it is going to be through a structure that's a modified version of those mouth parts, and it's sort of turned into this long curled straw. So we can also use that word proboscis to talk about the trunk of an elephant, and it just means a sort of a long tube-like extension. So that's a characteristic that's different. And then the pairs of wings, where either all of our organisms are either going to have none or two pairs. All right, now that we understand a little bit what this table is showing, let's think about how we're going to turn it into a diagram that shows the evolutionary relationships. And drawing these cladograms from a table is kind of fun. It's kind of like working a puzzle. If you like doing Sudokus, you're gonna, probably already have figured this one out. But there's a set of steps that we can go through. And if we go through those steps carefully, one by one, every time, it's going to make our drawing our cladograms pretty straightforward. So the first thing we're going to do is see how different each of these taxa is from the ancestor. And we're going to do that by just going across the table. So for each trait, we're going to look at the ancestor, and we're going to see if each of the other columns is the same as it or different. So this one's the same, this one's the same, this one's the same, this one's the same. So that one's not very useful. So we're going to go on to the next characteristic. Antennae. This one's plain, so that's the outgroup, that's the ancestor. Butterfly has plain, so it's the same. Dragonfly has plain, so it's the same as the ancestor. Now notice I'm comparing back to the ancestor every time. I'm not comparing to the next one over on the table. I'm going to compare this back to the outgroup. Plain is the same as the outgroup. Feathery is different from the outgroup, so I'm going to give that one a check. If you haven't noticed, I'm left-handed, so my checks look funny. All right, our outgroup has this no metamorphosis life cycle. Butterflies have metamorphosis, so that's different. I'm going to give them a check. Dragonflies are the same as the outgroup. Metamorphosis is different than the outgroup. Metamorphosis is different than the outgroup. Same thing here with mouth parts. Chewing is in the outgroup, so that means proboscis is different. Chewing is the same. Chewing is the same. Proboscis is different. All right. Pairs of wings is 0 for the outgroup. That means everything is different. All the other ones are different from the outgroup. All right. Now we have a total row in our table. And for that, you're going to count up the check marks. Now, this seems like the easiest part of doing the entire thing, but sometimes we will make a mistake doing it. So try and double check and make sure that you've counted carefully, because there's some little places where we can make careless errors that throw us off the track later. All right. So this is nice because we have come up with some different numbers here. If these were all the same, if all the groups were equally different to the outgroup, it would be hard to draw our tree. But I tried to make this one fairly straightforward so that you could see how it works. Now, when we're going to sketch our tree diagram, some of the practice ones in the lab manual, I've actually given you the structure of the tree. This can be hard to do the first few times you try, so you might want to use a pencil when you're trying to sketch these. And sometimes you're going to draw what you think is true and then realize you made a mistake. So it's okay to kind of work through some different versions of the tree. Now, we're going to start by making a twig that's going to go at the very edge on the left-hand side. Do it the other way, but this is kind of convention. And that's going to represent the root of the tree or where the ancestor came from. And I like to show the outgroup or the ancestor using a dotted line. You don't have to, you can draw a solid line, but I'm going to put silverfish up here. And I know I have 1, 2, 3, 4 more taxa that I need to put on here. And an easy way to draw your trees for the first time is to just draw sort of a simple stair step model and put enough twigs on there that you have enough for all of your taxas. So I have room for silverfish. I have room, or oops, I need one more in here. Whoops. All right, we'll make all the branches a little longer. Silverfish. Okay. 2, 3, 4 more. All right. So sometimes when we're starting to try and draw our trees, we get them too small, too big. They don't fit on the paper that well. But one thing you want to try and do is line up the tips along the edge here. Remember, if we have a tip that's much shorter, then that means that that species went extinct. So these are all different kinds of organisms that are still alive today. All right, if we have a characteristic that every single one of our groups has, that means silverfish have it and everybody else has it. And so that means it has to go on the very base of our tree. So we're going to do two things. We're going to put the names of the taxa onto the tips of our branches. And then we're also going to put the apomorphes along the tree to show what characteristics changed over evolutionary time and what characteristics each of our taxa have. We should be able to tell by following those apomorphes up the tree. And we're going to start by just looking at the number. So here we have the outgroup. The next taxa that's most similar to the outgroup should be the one with the smallest number of check marks. So we're going to put dragonfly here. All right, and then we're going to look at our tree and say, okay, well, that dragonfly split off, and then the next characteristic that changed, the next taxonomic group we should put onto our tree is going to be the one with the next larger number of changes from the ancestor. So we started with dragonfly, we're going to go to grasshopper with 2. All right, and now we're going to look for the one with 3, that's butterfly, and 4, that's moth. All right, everybody with me? All right, so now we want to look at what changed in between each of these taxa. So we started with 3 pairs of legs. Everybody has that. That's an ancestral characteristic, so it goes below any of the branching points. Now we want to look at what's different between silverfish and dragonfly. So here we have silverfish, here we have dragonfly. We went from having 0 pairs of wings to 2 pairs of wings. So we're going to put this change. Now we aren't just going to put 2 on here because we want to know 2 what. So 2 pairs of wings. Now that means everybody else should also have that characteristic. So we should see that grasshopper, butterfly, and moth also have it. And that's true because that's what our tree is saying, is that everything above here on the tree should have that. Now let's look at the difference between dragonfly and grasshopper. So here we have dragonfly, here we have grasshopper, they're the same here. This is different, all right? So metamorphosis evolved in this tree before grasshopper, but after dragonfly. All right, so our grasshopper has it, our butterfly and our moth have it. What's different between grasshopper and butterfly and moth? Well, here's grasshopper. It's got metamorphosis and 2 pairs of wings. Butterfly and moth have metamorphosis, 2 pairs of wings, and they both have proboscis that grasshopper doesn't have. Put that on here. All right, now can we tell butterfly from moth? If there's a characteristic that distinguishes one from the other, we want to add that on here too. And we're going to look at their tables and we're going to see that the difference between them is plain versus feathery antennae. So we're going to put feathery antennae on here. All right, this is a pretty straightforward tree. There's really only one way we can draw it that makes sense. So the ones we're going to have for this class are going to be pretty simple. They're going to get a little harder than this, but not that much harder. Things get really complicated really fast. We can have all kinds of tricky things happen in evolution. We can have characters that are gained. We can have characters that are lost. But you want to try and start with the table and check off which characteristics are different from the ancestor. And if we see somewhere here, like say we had proboscis that evolved and then was lost for some reason, we want to count that as two characteristics to help us understand that this change happened and then that other change happened. All right, so we're going to get a little bit more practice working on these when you go through your lab manual activities, and more review and practice I'll be doing in the in-person session.